What are the stakes of this game for Syracuse football? I think it's pretty clear. This is a must-win game on Saturday. You look at the schedule for Syracuse. We know by now that it's not very easy. We know this. If Syracuse wants to make a bowl this year, which requires them to win at least 6 games, they better beat the UConn Huskies on Saturday. Now, Syracuse, they didn't need to upset Tennessee, although it would have been nice if Syracuse could have stolen that one in Atlanta, Georgia, get a win on the board, help you get to that bowl game in 2025. But they didn't need to beat Tennessee. They absolutely have to beat the UConn Huskies, whether it's a 1-point win, a 30-point win, really does not matter. They just have to go out and beat UConn in order to make a bowl in 2025. But the odds on this game suggest that UConn is no longer a pushover opponent for Syracuse. We'll get into the recent history of Syracuse against UConn, but in prior years, this was an automatic, circled win for Syracuse. We don't even need to worry about the UConn Huskies. But not anymore. FanDuel odds makers currently have Syracuse as 6.5-point favorites against UConn on Saturday. Really, this is more about UConn elevating its program rather than Syracuse declining as a program. Because as Syracuse fans, I think we can all agree, the program's heading in a pretty solid direction with head coach Fran Brown in his second year. But UConn is definitely on the up and up. That's a credit to them. And I don't like the UConn Huskies. Let's throw it out right there. I do not like UConn one bit. I hope Syracuse goes out and beats them by 45 on Saturday. But I have to acknowledge that, you know what? UConn is a much better football program this season, last season, and really since Jim Mora has taken over than in prior years. UConn is also coming to the Dome as a pretty confident team. In week 1, they got to beat up on Central Connecticut State, a 59-13 win. I get it's an FCS opponent, but still, you always got to be careful of teams that are coming into your building that are feeling pretty confident in themselves after a week 1 win. Their head coach, Jim Mora, has done a fantastic job. He's in his 4th year as UConn's coach. 2022, he took over a mess of a program. He leads them to a bowl in his first season. They end up losing the Myrtle Beach Bowl, but you know what? They go 6-7 that year. Positive year for UConn football. 2023 was a little bit of a step back. They go 3-9, but in 2024, they go 9-4, and they get the Fenway Bowl victory over North Carolina, which, by the way, North Carolina, that was before head coach Bill Belichick. I don't think North Carolina is going to be a bowl team this season after what we saw on Monday night against TCU. Now, maybe TCU is going to be a top 5-10 team in the country, so that's why they made North Carolina look terrible. But you know what? They came into the game unranked. That was an ugly, ugly game. Sorry I got sidetracked there. I just had to take a little dig at North Carolina here because that was absolutely hilarious. By the way, Syracuse, they play North Carolina later in the year on Halloween. They better beat North Carolina as well. That is now a must-win game for Syracuse now, just like UConn is. By the way, UConn might be better than North Carolina. But anyway, the history of Syracuse and UConn, the Orange have beaten UConn 5 consecutive times dating back to 2012, and the average margin of victory was 21 points. So that's what I mean when I say this used to be a game where we really didn't have to talk about it all that much. Syracuse, whether they were going to be at home or go on the road, they were going to beat UConn. No problem. No big deal. This is your easy free victory before you have to play a tougher team maybe the following week. But last year, things started to change. Syracuse was a good team, 9-3 in the regular season, 10-3 overall after our Holiday Bowl win, but they only beat UConn 31-24. I do think it's a little bit deceiving the score because at no point during that game did I really feel Syracuse was going to lose that game. But credit to UConn for fighting throughout and actually keeping it a pretty close game, maybe closer than what we thought it was going to be last season. UConn history versus the ACC. Another reason why UConn is a program that's definitely on the rise compared to prior years. 2022, they go 1-2 versus the ACC. They were blown out by Syracuse and NC State, but they did beat Boston College. In 2023, they go winless. They were 0-3 against the conference. And then in 2024, they go 1-3 against the ACC. But here are the results. They play Duke. Duke was a good team last year. They won 9 games. Only a 5-point loss for UConn. They played Wake Forest. Wake Forest was a team that did not make a bowl. UConn kept it close in that one, but they did fall short against Wake Forest, I believe, by 3 points. And then they play Syracuse, which we just mentioned, only a 7-point loss. Then they play in the Fenway Bowl, which we also mentioned, a 13-point victory over North Carolina. The overall point of this segment here is not to stare you, Syracuse fans. It's not to stare you. Syracuse football is still favored to win this game. Syracuse football should beat the UConn Huskies at home. They are probably, at least on paper, a more talented team than UConn. But this is not a free victory. This is not a pushover victory. The line isn't telling you, hey, Syracuse is a 28-point favorite. You don't need to worry about this one. No. UConn deserves a lot of respect. This is not UConn from 2017. This is 2025 UConn with a very good head coach in Jim Mora. He knows what he's doing. They got a very capable offense. Their defense is also very capable as well, which we'll get into later on in the show. This is a game for Syracuse that is not only a must-win game, but also a pretty good test for them to see where they are at this season. If they can go out and beat UConn by a ton of points, then hey, I think Syracuse fans, we should be feeling pretty good about ourselves. If Syracuse wins close, then you know what? UConn is actually a pretty good team. If Syracuse loses this game, we talked about it at the top, they're not making a bowl in 2025. That's really what's at stake here for Syracuse. Absolute must-win game against an improved opponent in the UConn Huskies.